Welcome to Faith Talks Wood podcast. I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.
Yeah, we're a podcast talks about everything from Jesus to joinery and a little bit of everything in between. So, Tom, I think I talked last week about our plans this past weekend. So when you walk into our house, it is all wood paneling. Old school from the late 60s, early 70s. Solid, knotty pine wood paneling. And so we decided we wanted to paint it white. And then the living room into the kitchen is all like chair height, beadboard, wood paneling with trim on it. And so we decided we wanted to paint it all white and make it look fancy. Well, it's got some old urethane on it from back in the day. And so we scuffed it up, sanded it, and I didn't know this, but I found this out. So we live in Pennsylvania. We're really close to the Ohio border. Buddy from church owns a painting company. And so I called him and I said, hey man, here's what we're about to do. What are your thoughts? And he says, you want to find oil-based primer because you got oil-based on the wood. You got oil on the wood. So you want oil-based primer. He said, but it's outlawed in Ohio. You can't buy oil-based primer in Ohio. He said, so see if you can find it in PA. And so ended up, I couldn't get it in my town, but in Erie, where I work, the Home Depot had oil-based primer. And so I went and bought a couple gallons of it. And Saturday, got up and the kids and I went up to the Children's Museum. It's like an all hands-on thing. There's like big splash table thing, make a river and all that. And so did all that. And then I got home. Well, we got done and my wife still had a lot to do because she was painting at the house or priming. And so I dropped the kids off the in-laws and I went to the house and I didn't but walk in the garage and I could smell that stuff. It was like Agent Orange or something. Man, it was so strong. And it's like putting Elmer's glue on the wall. It's just super thick, sticks to everything. And it's just hard to spread. I mean, I helped to the last hour just finish out and get the rest of it put on. But so that part's done. And now we got to paint. So this weekend is painting weekend, which that paint will go a lot easier than the primer did. But it's amazing when you walk into a house. Our house was built in the late 60s and you got all this wood, and even just having the white primer on it brightened it up and made it like holy moly. And so we're really excited. It's funny, I told my wife our house is going to look fancy with all this white and nice white, wainscoting in the living room and stuff. We're going to be living the fancy life out here in the country. So but that oil-based primer, man, I didn't realize it was outlawed in some places, but yeah.
It's outlawed here in Colorado, man. It's same thing with lacquer. That's why when I first moved here, back in North Carolina, everything I sprayed with lacquer. I love lacquer. Can't get it here. All my
you
favorite.
You use lacquer as weed killer, man. That stuff is potent too,
dude. It's retarded but California starts everything. Then I hate to say it, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Washington
we're bad.
State. It's all a bunch of liberal idiots in the cities. That's what it is. I mean, if you would delete Boulder and Denver from the state of Colorado, the rest of the state has common sense. If you delete Pittsburgh and Philadelphia from Pennsylvania, the rest of the state has common sense. But man, it just drives me crazy because to go over an oil-based paint, you have to have an oil-based primer. Like I have tried all the ones that they say that'll work with latex. They don't work worth darn. You got to scuff it up, do an oil-based primer, and then you could go with a latex paint over top of it of primer. But you got to get that bond, man. And so
we're getting the house modernized. We bought the house and put brand new floors in the whole place, and it still had all that nasty wood paneling. And now we're painting it and making it look nice. So
never thought you'd hear a bunch of woodworkers say nasty wood paneling, huh?
Yeah, man. It just, that whole wood look I don't mind it. Like my in-laws built a huge kitchen and dining room addition, and my father-in-law is a woodworker and he has a sawmill, and he did the whole one wall in wood. It was like a, you would think of a pallet wood, but it's all hardwood, walnut, maple, oak, cherry, and it's just different ones, and it looks really cool.
Like as an
Um,
accent wall.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
But to have a whole
But
entire room of wood paneling is just so dark. But
oh,
that's,
dude, my uncle built his house. It's a log cabin house, and the whole inside is all wood.
yep,
The floor is Brazilian cherry, and it's all wood. The whole ceiling, everything.
yep. House I
It's a
grew
bit
up in
it's a
was
bit
like that.
much.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
light a match the wrong way, and there it goes.
yep, that's exactly right.
So awesome. Well, before we get into it with our guest today, I just want to say thank you to the patrons out there. You guys are awesome. If you want to support us on Patreon, do so at patreon.com/Face Talks Wood. Appreciate all you guys out there. That 5-star review on Apple goes a long way. Love seeing the good reviews over there. And so give us that 5-star if you think we're worth it. And then pray for the podcast. And we really, really love this podcast and believe that God has ordained it. And so we ask for your prayers. And so without further ado, Tom, who's on the podcast today?
And I'm excited today. So I was born and raised in South Carolina and grew up right near where our guest lives. And ironically, it's upstate South Carolina. Name of his business is Upwoodworks. And his name is Justin Uppole. God loves Jesus. Does some amazing wood turning pins and bowls. And I can't remember if you started or you're just a member, but I seen a thing on your Instagram a while back about the Upstate Makers Guild in South Carolina, and
Yeah.
if I was there, I'd be a member because I love it. And so next time I come to my mom's in South Carolina, me and you are going to meet in person because I grew up about 30 minutes from where you live. But
Perfect.
welcome to the podcast, Justin. Man, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Yeah. I'm here. I'm a woodworker. I'm Christian first. Grew up in a small town in West Virginia. And we'll get into more about my story there in a little bit, but worked through school, went to college. One time wasn't enough, stayed there and got a second degree. And then when I finished my master's degree, job market in West Virginia just wasn't what it needed to be for my career. And I believe wholeheartedly that God put you where you need to be and guide you where you need to be, and brought me to South Carolina. I've been here since January of 2006. So I've lived here almost longer than I lived anywhere else. But got the job with the hospital system down here, worked as an athletic trainer in the schools with them for about 15 years, all told, through school and everything, about 20 years in the schools as an athletic trainer. And decided, as I needed to shift priorities, that shift and that job wasn't the right fit for me. I'm still working for the same hospital system. It's the big hospitals here in the upstate. It's Prisma Health. But I now work with a hand surgeon, which is crazy that I'm a woodworker and work for a hand surgeon and see the table saw injuries come in. And
I need that saw stop.
we actually have one of our surgeons is actually a woodworker as well. And we've talked and we've done some things and everything. And he was talking about how he had an old Powermatic table saw, and he was on call one night, and then somebody came in with a bad table saw injury, and he went home and he didn't turn that saw back on. Went and told his wife he needed to go buy a saw stop. His hands were too important. So, but yeah, I work for a hand surgeon, maintain their schedule all their surgeries, and run their clinic and all that. Been married for 15 years. Have have a daughter who'll be 12 in a month. And we'll get into more of that later, but I freak people out all the time. She's one of 12 that I've had in my house. Only one I have now, but she's one of 12. So we'll talk about that later. Of things that my wife and I have done throughout the years. But yeah, just to get into my testimony a little bit. Again, I was raised in West Virginia. I was raised in a Christian home. We were in church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, involved in the kids ministry, involved in the youth growing up. My grandfather was a preacher. He was an old country Baptist preacher. He wasn't a shouting fire brimstone, but he was a stutterer. When he would get excited, he'd stutter a little bit, and I can still hear him going through all that. And when he'd get excited, and I can remember Christmas Eve, we would always be at their house for Christmas Eve with the family. And it wasn't anything for him to preach a sermon and have an altar call with the family on Christmas Eve. So I grew up in the church. It's all I've ever known. I accepted Christ on a Sunday night in November of 1987. So I was baptized in that same church in January of 88. It was the last Sunday that the preacher of that church was there before he moved on to a different church. And so sang in the choir at the church, helped with all that. My parents started a little Southern gospel group through the church. I worked with them. I traveled to the homecomings and different things that they did around the area, ran their sound, helped with their setup. Then I went to college, and I didn't go to church. I stopped. And I think part of that is I am very introverted. I am very shy. If I don't know people, I don't like going to do something. It's hard for me to go do that and put myself out there if I don't have somebody there with me that I can lean on and talk to and all that. And so I never found that group when I was in college. I tried a couple times going to church around there. I went to the Baptist campus ministry events there on campus every now and then, but it just never hit with me. I'd still go to church if I went home on the weekends. That was about a 2-hour drive to go home for the weekend, so I didn't do it that often. But then there was one weekend that I was going home, and I was supposed to go camping or fishing with my dad. I don't remember exactly what it was. And my grandmother died. And I got mad. I don't know why, but I got mad. And that hurt towards God kept me out of church even longer. But praise God, he never left me, I left him. I've heard it said a long time ago that you can run as far away from God as you want, but all you have to do is turn around, he's right there. When I was in school, lived in an apartment, I ended up getting a job at a grocery store, which is where I had worked through high school and everything like that. Worked in grocery stores, doing everything from dairy and deli and register and all of it. I was even in the meat department helping cut and pack meats. But there was a high school kid that was there that I worked with, and his dad worked there too. And they kind of befriended me, and we got to doing things. And this high school kid invited me to go to church with him. And I started going to that church when I could, when I wasn't working on Sundays. And that got me back into church, was that one high school kid inviting me back and I'm a junior in college. And I think he was a senior in high school at the time. But like I said, I started going there. changed jobs. I was working for a traumatic brain injury program, a group home, working in the house, helping with the clients and their activities of daily living and different things. And one thing led to another, and I actually lost that job, and I moved back home. I had to move out of my apartment and move back home. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything to do. And that was in the summer. And I was able to get a GA position back at the same school at Marshall. But the GA position was in Charleston, which was about an hour away. And so I was working in the high schools there while going to school at night to get my master's degree. And lived with a friend the first year right across the street from his grandmother. And they adopted me, his whole family did. And ended up going to the church that they were members of. Small church. We were lucky to have 50 people a Sunday morning. And I say lucky, I mean, there were Sundays that it was 20, 25. But I got heavily involved in that church, working with the youth. Actually ended up becoming the youth director before I left. Just as other people had left and somebody needed to step up, and I did. I sang in the choir. I ran the sound system, and that was a chore to sing in the choir up front and run to the back to help with the soundboard in the back of the sanctuary. Helped with the praise team some. And I actually stood in the pulpit and preached 2 sermons at that church. And it was awesome. The first one that I did, my grandfather came.
Oh, man.
And he was there, and the only thing he told me at the end, he said, "That was great, but you could have gone longer."
Man, that's awesome, though, that your granddad came in and listened to you preach, man.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I finished up my master's degree and moved to South Carolina. And I had to start all over again. I knew nobody here. I had some friends in Asheville. Tommy, it's about 45 minutes to an hour from here, up the mountain. But here local, I didn't have anybody. And I started off at a bigger church and met some people and tried to get involved, and it just didn't fit. And so I moved on to a smaller church because that's what I was comfortable with. And again, I got involved. I sang in the choir. I started a small Southern gospel quartet that we sang a couple times there at the church, and worked with the youth and taught the youth Sunday school class and did things with them. And then things happened at that church that just made me think that was not the place I needed to be. The pastor started making it more about him and his accomplishments and the fact that he was a successful businessman and decided to go back into the ministry, and which there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying you can't do that and you're not called to do that, but it became more about him than it was about the church. And it was what he wanted, not necessarily what the church wanted. And I ended up moving with some friends that were there to a bigger church, a mile or so down the road. And that church had a singles ministry. And that's where I met my wife. And so, again, God leads you where you need to be. I'm not saying that there was truly anything wrong with that other church, but it wasn't the spot for me. And if I hadn't made that move, and if she hadn't made the move from the church that she had been at, we would have never met. And so I think that's, a big thing is to consider as you're moving through life as to what God has in mind for you. And I know you all have talked about it multiple times about praying about everything and listening for the word of God. And I'm reminded about in can't remember if it's First Kings or Second Kings, where Elijah's in the cave, and God's coming by, and he's not in the fire, he's not in the earthquake, he's not in the rain, he's in that small still voice, and that you got to really focus and listen to know what God has in plans in store for you. And in Jeremiah he tells us, I know the plans I have for you, and they're not plans to harm you, it's plans to prosper you. And so, I believe wholeheartedly in that. And he brought me Sean, and we've had our ups and downs and everything, but we've been together now for 16 years and married for 15. And we got married in August of 2009. It's the easiest anniversary I'll ever remember, because it's 8/109. So we bought our house the next year, and we started talking about kids and wanting kids and how and all that. And we were actually on a family trip. I think we were at Disney, and we were walking around by ourselves, and we started talking about, well, we have this house, we don't have kids, it's just sitting there, it's just the two of us. What do you think about fostering? And we talked about it, and we talked to our family about it, and they kind of talked us out of it. And they didn't think we had the temperament for it, and we probably kind of agreed that we didn't, that it was going to be hard for us to bring kids into the house and have them for a short period of time or however long, and then have to send them home and have to lose them. And so we didn't. And then we kept, talking about kids and trying to have kids, and it wasn't God's plan for us, apparently, because we don't have our own children. We started talking about adoption, and we started looking at adoption. And guys, I'm going to tell you, adoption is expensive. Mm-hmm. This was 2012, I think, that we were looking at this, and local agency here, Bethany Christian Services. We went through their program, we went through their class, started looking at everything, and our pass-through, our cost to them, without the pass-through cost that would go to the birth mother, and it was subsidized, was $17,000.
That's cheap.
I agree.
Dude.
I agree.
Yeah, that's very. I know somebody did. It was $50,000 for them.
Right.
Yeah, that's
right.
But still. Huh.
And then you have the pass-through costs that go to the birth mother to pay medical bills, to pay utility bills or car payments because they can't work, things like that. And then when they have the child, they can decide they don't want to give them up for adoption, and you're out all that money. And it just became not a financial possibility for us. We tried fundraising, and it didn't work out. And I think that was because God didn't have that in the plans for us. And so we looked again at fostering, and we started fostering and went through the whole process, took all the classes, got the license, and waiting on that first placement. And we were licensed for 2 kids. And we got the first 2, was a sibling group. 2-year-old boy and his 8-year-old brother. And 3 weeks later, they said, hey, would you mind upping your license to 3 and taking in their little sister? We went from 0 to 3 kids in 3 weeks. 3-month-old girl, 2-year-old boy, and an 8-year-old boy.
Wow.
And this was October of 2012. And we had them until the Thursday before Christmas that year. We thought we were going to have them until at least spring. And, luckily we hadn't gone out and bought Christmas presents for them yet. We were planning on it. But the judge decided that Mom had done enough and it was time for them to go home. I'm grateful. I mean, if that's the right place for them, send them home. It hurt us. And that was probably our first big hurt. But we felt that we needed to be there for somebody else. And so we told our agency, hey, we're open. We're willing to take another one. They had a sibling group of 4 that was coming into care that they could find a place for them that night. So in 24 hours, we flipped our house and took in a sibling group of 4. A 3-year-old girl, a 7-year-old girl, an 8-year-old girl, and an 11-year-old boy. And got them Christmas. They had it, we gave them a good Christmas. We had them until February. And, it's hard with kids who have raised themselves and been dependent on each other for them to let a caring adult take over. And we saw some of that, and, it was never believed, but there were accusations that we were being mean and doing the wrong thing and this and that. And obviously the caseworkers never believed it, never really looked into it. But could have, and it could have cost us a big issue with my wife being a teacher and me working in the schools at the time. But they left in February and went to live with their grandmother. So a family placement. And we decided that we didn't grieve enough the first time. We needed to take a break. And so we closed our beds and just said that, hey, we're taking a small break. We'll let you know when we're ready. And our person with the placement agency that we were licensed with knew our intentions, knew that we were looking to adopt out of foster care, and called us about the 1st of March and said, hey, we've got a little girl in the hospital right now. We're almost positive this is going to be an adoptive case. We know this is what you're looking for. Will you open back up and take her? And we prayed about it, and we said yes. That little girl has never left our house. She is truly a miracle child. I don't want to go into her whole story just in case she listens to this, because we haven't talked about all of this with her. But she wasn't supposed to be here either. And I'll leave it at that. And I think everybody listening can gather what that means. She was born with no prenatal care, born in a house with no utilities, wasn't at the hospital, drugs in her system. We met her in the NICU at 5 days old. Brought her home at 7 days old. She's one of the smartest, funniest, brightest girls that I've known. She can crack off some one-liners and throw out voices and just make you laugh. She's been a blessing to us. But so we had her, and then took in another girl that was, 4 or 5. I can't remember exactly how old she was. And we had her through the summer, and she was getting ready to leave, and we knew she was leaving, which was great that we had time to plan for her to leave. And that sibling group of 4 that we'd had at Christmas came back into care. And when they come back into care, they always go back to the last placement they had. Can you take them? And we had to say no. We didn't have room for 5 kids in this house. They wouldn't have put 5 kids in this house because we didn't have enough beds for them. But we told them how, if they had to split them up, how that needed to happen. And they couldn't do that as well as we had hoped. And so we ended up taking the youngest one back in. And we had her for 2 years. And parental rights were terminated. They were open for adoption. And we were working towards adopting that that girl. By the time she left us, she was about 5 years old. And as we got closer to that becoming a reality, and she knew that was going to be a reality, things started changing. She hadn't been with her siblings in 2 years. She'd had a few visits with them. Nobody thought the sibling bond was still there. But the closer we got to adoption and to that becoming the reality, she started becoming more aggressive. She started becoming aggressive towards my daughter. And she started acting out more. And we had to make the difficult decision that this was not going to be where she needed to be, that we were not the best place for her to be. Praise God, we found out a couple of years later that a family here in the state was able to adopt all 4 of the kids, and they were doing great. And that was only because the kids still talked about us and they knew our names, and she looked us up and found my wife on Facebook and sent a message to her. But when we had to make that difficult decision, there was a lot of family hurt. There was a lot of hurt relationships. I was almost not invited to my brother's wedding because he was mad at me, because he had formed a relationship and a bond with this girl and didn't understand. Again, he lives in Ohio now. He still lived in West Virginia then. He wasn't around when everything was going on, and I don't blame him for that. My wife's sister didn't talk to us for a long time because of it, because she felt we gave up on the girl, and that's just not what you do. And we had some church hurt. The church we were going to at the time didn't understand what was going on, and their attitude towards us changed. Their attitude towards Lizzie changed. So much so that we left that church and started looking again, and found the church that we've been at now for 8 years, I think. I have to get back and count it up, but yeah. But we've had 2 other placements, 3 more kids since that time. And we haven't fostered now in 6 years. We've closed down. We've let our license go. Different life things happening, and it just not in the cards for us to do that right now. We've brought other people into fostering by telling them our story and telling them what we went through and talking to them, and they've been able to adopt, and grow their families that way. But to get to where we're at now, we're at a church here in Spartanburg, highly active. I'm one of the deacons in the church, not active currently, but I'm an ordained deacon with the church. I've sang in the choir previously. I'm working towards doing that again as schedules allow. I've worked with the youth. And then my wife and I are now currently the teachers for the preteen Sunday school class. So we have the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders every Sunday, and do different things with them. We're planning our spring preteen retreat, where we'll take them somewhere for a weekend and work with them and teach them and just have some time with them there. And so that's where we're at now. And I keep coming back to it that I truly believe that if I hadn't listened to God, I wouldn't be here where I'm at, and that He's put me exactly where I need to be.
Amen. I know, well, we had Mark Morgan on the podcast, and Mark's a good friend of ours, and friend of the podcast, friend of Tom and I, and he's went through some stuff with fostering.
Yeah, I sent him a couple messages on Instagram after after one of the Thursday night Bible studies that I was able to catch, and I don't catch many of them, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
hate that, but they start at 10 o'clock, and I get up at 5 a.m.
Yeah, they had to kind of change that around. And then we had some close friends from our church in Tennessee who they brought in as foster 2 sisters and a younger brother, and that was they come from a really, really, really bad background, and they ended up adopting them back in 2019, 2020, something like that. Ended up adopting them, and now the one is graduated high school, or about to graduate high school, and but I can tell you from knowing that family and knowing others, man, foster care is no joke. It's not
It's not. It's
not for the
not.
faint of heart. It's definitely it's a calling, and I commend those who can do it. That's my wife and I have chatted about a little bit. Not something I think that our hearts are desired for. Um, we've got 2 kids, and we've got they keep us on our toes enough as it is. So, but man, thank you for the time you've poured into them, and now you've got your little one who's
Oh
not
yeah.
so little anymore. So,
Yeah, she's almost as tall as my wife and I. So, of course, I'm not that tall. I'm only 5'6". So,
okay.
but but I will say with foster care, it is a calling, and you have to have the calling for the entire family.
Yep.
If you've got kids, they've got to be involved in it. If you've got to have your parents and your extended family involved with it. You got to have your church involved with it.
Yep.
And what a lot of people don't realize is you got to get that church involved with it, because there's so much that has to go into it with the kids. We live stream our services. I don't know how we would do that with the way we do our children's sermon with foster kids right now, because they would be there on the stage with their face potentially on the camera on
Oh yeah.
through
Yep.
YouTube. We were there for an Easter event with one of the kids, and I don't even remember which group it was. I think it was the last sibling group of girls that we had. We had an Easter event, and we were there, and we were getting ready to walk into the youth room where they were doing something, and some lady we didn't know called out one of the girls by name.
Oh, that's tough.
And we don't know where she knew her from, and so we left.
Yeah.
And you had to have people that understand that.
Right.
That if we have to get up and leave, it's nothing with what you're doing. There's some reason that we have to do that.
Yep.
But I will say, if you are fostering, if you are into that the biggest thing that I've ever been told, and that I believe, is that you've got to know that when you pour into the love to these kids, that you are making a difference in their life for the time that you have them, and they never forget that.
Right.
And as the Bible says, the word of God never returns void, and if you put it into them, it's going to stick.
Yep.
Some form or another.
Seed. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I always wondered with friends that I have that they'll post pictures of their family, and the foster kids will have little smiley faces over them, on Facebook or whatever. And that's just for the protection of the kids and, keeping that privacy and stuff. But what's interesting is after adoption, they didn't do that anymore.
Right.
You would post pictures. So I guess whatever changes in that, but,
for the most part, adopting out of foster care is a closed adoption. So meaning that records are sealed. The parents don't know where the kids are at. The kids don't, in Lizzie's case, she doesn't know who her birth mother is. I do, because I've been told by a very nice guardian ad litem that we had things about what was going on. And so I know the name of her birth mother. and I know the situation there. But in Lizzie's case, we changed everything. We changed her name. We got a new social security number. We did all of that because we hadn't applied for the social security card mom had. And so
That can be used for credit, all kinds of bad
correct.
stuff.
Yeah. So we were able to change everything. And it's easier for us with her because she was still an infant when we got her as a placement. And it was a fast case. I think we shocked people, including the lawyer who handled our end of it. She was 14 months old when we finalized the adoption. Parental rights were terminated before she was 1. And so then it was just the process of waiting for the appeals to be done, posting for mom because they didn't know where she was at this point, posting for dad, who they thought was dad, and John Doe, and all of this, and waiting the time before we could then be chosen as the adoptive family, and then having to wait on the court date.
It's still a pretty quick process.
Oh yeah, that was the fastest that I've known of. That it took place, that from birth to adoption was 14 months.
Yeah, that's pretty fast. The sad thing about adoption and foster care and, well, the adoption side is how hard it can be. Like, if you're a proven family and you've had the kids and you want to bring them in your home and adopt them, and it's like the government just makes it extremely hard for that kid to get that second chance, that life, that it's.
They do, but I see both sides of it, and I see the reasoning behind some of it is they want to make sure that they're putting the kids in the best place they can. They're wanting to make sure that they look at the termination of parental rights as the last thing. I mean, that's a death sentence. They don't like doing that. The goal of foster care is always reunification with the family or with some family member. And the termination is when that is finally it's not possible for that to happen. My biggest thing was, and I have to laugh at it now, is that when we decided to become adoptive parents, we had to go back to do more classes. We had to do a couple more 8-hour classes on parenting. And yes, there's some differences in adopting and parenting kids out of foster care than there are most of the time biological kids. But there were people in there who were grandparents that were having to take parenting classes to be able to adopt their grandkids.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand some of it, but to me, anytime the government gets involved, they just make things more difficult than what it needs to be. And if you've got a loving set of parents and a kid that needs a loving home, it ought to be one of the fastest, easiest, because, man, I mean, there's so many kids that are just stuck in the foster system that would love to have a loving family to live with permanently. And
oh, yeah.
They make everything so difficult, and I just don't understand it sometimes. But
I will say, I learned about this in like 2011, 2012. And people don't like talking about it, but the sex trafficking world is pretty dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that's some of the reasons why they have to have the stringent rules and the some of that is intentional, I think, for that, because there's a lot of evil out there, man.
Yeah, that's true.
Insane.
That's true.
And we have people who get licensed as foster parents who aren't good parents, who are just as abusive as the biological parents, if not sometimes worse. And so I understand that. And our home was always open. DSS could show up in South Carolina Department of Social Services. It's who takes care of the kids. They could show up for an inspection anytime. We had to have the fire marshal come through once a year to make sure our house was in order. Fire extinguisher was there and all that, and smoke detectors working, and the amount of inspections and home studies that we had to have to be able to foster and then even to adopt was crazy. But yeah, I understand the regulations and what they have to do, because while they're in foster care, even though they're in your care, the state's still responsible.
So, what's interesting though, when I was in ministry, we had a family from our church who wanted to adopt, foster, or whatever, and they kept getting denied. And something happened, and the lead pastor and I went over to pray with them. And when you walked in their house, you realized why. I mean, it was just a disaster. They had cats and crap everywhere, and it was like, this place is in disarray. And it just kind of validified why they were getting denied. And I hate to say that, that they're good people, but they don't have a home situation that at the time was, made sense, and they didn't understand that. They completely oblivious to it. So,
well, my niece and her husband, they started out, it was similar to you, where they were going to foster one child, and then they took I'm trying to, they got their daughter first, and then like almost, it wasn't like the next day, but within a matter of days or weeks, they then got asked, could you take her brother too? And then, long story short, they ended up adopting both of them. And now, let's see, they've had them for probably, I guess, 7 years or so now. And they're just one big happy family. And it all started they were just felt like God wanted them to foster one child.
Yeah.
But, I think the important thing that you talked about was you're talking about listening to God. And I've been reading this book that I've got one chapter left, and the whole premise is the book is on prayer, but the part that just really stood out, and I think so much when people say they don't hear from God, that in the book, the lady says, if you're not hearing from God, you're probably talking too much. And so if you want to hear what God's telling you, you got to sit back and do some listening. And then that's just what ends up happening. You have 12 years later, you got a daughter, and, when you listen to that voice telling you to do something that may not make sense, fostering and, all this stuff. But I think it's phenomenal, man. Just, I love hearing stories like this.
Well, to go along with what you were saying, I've done studies in prayer, and, and we're told to go into the inner room to pray. And does that mean you got to find this closet and go into this, shut everything out and all that? And I don't think that's true, but I think you need to find a time and a space where you can turn off all the distractions. You can turn off the phone, you can turn off the TV, and you can just sit and have the time to pray and read and listen and be in conversation with God. That's one of the reasons I now get up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
But I was just gonna say, because of Tom, thanks Tom, I've been trying to get up earlier, and my favorite time in the morning is time in the Word, and early in the morning.
I'm telling you, man.
Nobody's up yet. I'm out in the living room sitting on the couch.
Yep.
Just me and the Word and my pen. I never grew up writing in my Bible, and I finally have, given in now. I'm taking notes and doing stuff in the Bible, and yeah, I just sit there and I don't know, I just love it. It's my favorite times.
Oh, mine too, man. I'm telling you, the first 2 hours of the day are my favorite 2 hours because
No, I don't get that much time. I get about 30 minutes is what I get.
I take about 30 to 40 minutes. I get up and I do my time, and then my alarm used to go off at 5:50 anyway. I'd get up and start making lunches, get my daughter up. I'm out the door by 7, or I don't get to work by 8. And I only work, Tom, where 385 is at. I only work 385 in Roper Mountain Road. So it's 18 miles from my house, but it can take me an hour to get there.
Yep.
But I do that, and then Fridays I actually have to go to Seneca. So I'm down in the Clemson area.
Oh, I know that area too well, man.
So that's a 120-mile round trip for me on Fridays, and that's usually when I listen to the podcast is on that drive to.
Well, I thought I had a 45 each way, 90-mile round trip, long days.
I only do that once a week and only 3 Fridays a month usually, and that's 60 miles one way and about an hour and a half time.
Yeah.
But are they paying you mileage?
Yeah. I get paid 80 miles of that 120.
Okay, gotcha.
Wow, that's awesome.
I just realized the federal rate went up to 70 cents a mile this year.
Yeah.
That's because gas is still an arm and a leg. But yeah, my mom and dad, they were both born in Seneca. All my grandparents, most of my aunts and uncles live up there. So and my dad graduated from Clemson, so diehard Tiger fan. But yeah, man, I love Seneca, South Carolina, man. Especially Lake Kiowee. That's where I learned to water ski, and I got so many great memories of being out on the boat with my dad's best friend, Bill Brock Drillers up in Seneca. They'd take us out. So I still remember I was 6 years old. I got in the water, fell. And I was like, I'm done. I want to get back in the boat. It's like, the only way you get back in the boat when you learn how to ski. Get up, try it again. It's eventually I got up, and then I didn't want to get back in the boat. But I love Seneca, South Carolina. It's beautiful country up there.
It is.
Like it is. Upstate South Carolina is gorgeous. Like I was born in Charleston when my dad was in the Air Force. And there's nothing wrong with, go down Charleston or Harbor Island or Fripp Island or any of those places. But I just love upstate South Carolina, man. It's absolutely beautiful. And speaking
it's a great place to be.
So tell us about how you got into woodworking, and tell us a little bit about the Upstate Makers Guild, because I'm very curious. I want to come hang out when I come back to South Carolina.
All right. So I've been into, I guess, creating things for as long as I can remember. Always drawing, always tinkering and doing things. Got in trouble. My parents gave me a remote control truck one year for Christmas from Radio Shack, and I played with it for a while and ran it, and then I took it apart. Never really got it back together, but I took it apart trying to figure out how it worked. Was in the Boy Scouts, and Scoutmaster or assistant Scoutmaster that lived right across the street from me. I was doing stuff with him. He had a shopsmith in his garage. One of the guys in my scout troop for his Eagle project, we built trash cans holders for a one-room schoolhouse museum that was in the area, and then another one built picnic tables. And so we all worked together on that. And I always helped doing things around the house with my dad, and was there when we built the deck on the back of the house and different things. And always enjoyed that kind of stuff. Bought birdhouse kits and made birdhouses and had a book to do that. In fact, it's still on my bookshelf in the bedroom on birdhouse plans from when I was a kid. But when I moved down here, I was a poor college kid. I was just poor. Living in an apartment, hand-me-down furniture. and I borrowed a sander from a guy at the school I worked at, and sanded down a couple end tables and a bedside table and the microwave stand that I'd bought at Kmart, and refinished them. Sanded them down, painted them. In fact, the microwave stand's still in our kitchen. It's been painted a couple more times. The top was spray painted with the stone spray paint, so it's got that textured stone look. It's still the same. But so I did that, and then, just doing things like that. Got married, moved to the house. Didn't really have tools, didn't build anything for the house. Borrowed a jigsaw to cut a hole in the door to put a cat door in one of the closets so we could put the litter box in a closet. But looking at different things and doing different things, I've always watched like This Old House and all the woodworking shows, American Woodworker, and on PBS, and Old School Home Time, if you remember that one. I always got into that stuff. I was into cars, always loved watching the car shows, and always wanted to build my own car and all that. But just started tinkering around and said, hey, I think I want to make some knives for my dad and my brother for Christmas. So I bought the knife kit and used the jigsaw to cut the scales, jankiest stuff, dangerous stuff that I ever did. And, doing things like that. And then I got a circular saw for Christmas, and my own sander, and this, and jigsaw, and all this to be able to do all this better and all that. And then I found plans from, I think, Anna White to do a toy chest or hope chest. I was going to build my wife one for Valentine's Day. And I got her permission. I showed her the plans and said, this is what I want to build you, because this is how much it's going to cost. And again, we on the budget and tried to make sure we had the money to do everything and still, pay it off debt and all that. And so I started building the first one, and then friends of ours got pregnant and had a baby shower, and she said, why don't you make the toy chest for that? And so I made that first one into the toy chest for them, and then built the second box, and then never finished it. It sat around the shop in the garage in the house for years and never got finished before it finally got thrown on the scrap heap, because we now don't have room for it. But I was ripping down 1x2s for this hope chest, toy chest, with a circular saw.
One by twos with a circular saw.
Yep.
And you talk that Saw Stop don't make circular saws.
Nope. But no, I got into just doing things like that and different projects, and I built my daughter's bed, which used to be in the room I'm in now. In fact, this computer is sitting on part of it. So I built her a loft bed in here, and then we decided to move her upstairs and to a bigger bed. And so she's got a full-size bed upstairs in our bonus room. And I broke that bed down and built this for my wife. And this was actually going to be a dog crate that she could do work on as well. Dog crate underneath. And then we lost the lab that we were building it for. And so it just kind of sat here, and it's got a top on it. It's open underneath and a bunch of stuff under here. So she still wants me to put doors on it, and that'll probably happen one day. But went to the woodworking show in 2016 in Atlanta. I think that's when they did the big video. Woodworkers were down there with April Wilkerson and Jay Bates and Jimmy DeResta, and all of them were down there. And they had a turn your own pen thing. And so I went back there and turned a pen and loved it. And I think that year we were down in Florida for Thanksgiving, and I went to the Rockler down there in Altamont Springs when it first opened. And I bought my first lathe on Black Friday that year. And actually, my first lathe is my only lathe. It's the one that's still technically mine that's sitting in the shop. I've got another one that a friend of mine is letting me use for right now. But started turning pens. Had that friend that's loaning me the other one. He came up from Florida and taught me how to turn a bowl here in the shop, and then I've done stuff in his shop and just messing around and trying to have fun with it. You know, I've tried to sell things and I've done craft shows and had stuff on Etsy and didn't do well on Etsy, and so I've let that one go for right now. But it's a hobby. It's something for me just to do to have fun and relax and have fun with and try different things.
Oh man, you make some beautiful bowls, some pens. I'm impressed. That's one thing I want to learn how to do. I don't own a lathe, but that's a dream that one day I would have enough space and money and time to get a lathe and learn how to turn.
I will tell you this, Tom. Once you get a lathe, most of your other tools just start rusting.
Really?
It's a rabbit hole. Once you start, you don't want to do much else. And I think it's the instant gratification. I can take a piece of wood and make a bowl in a couple hours. A simple bowl. I can do a pen. I can do a slimline pen, say your standard cross pen. I can do one start to finish in 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yep. Funny enough, everybody hates on Harbor Freight. People love the Harbor Freight version of the little benchtop lathe for doing pens and stuff.
That's what I have. Mine's the Rockler version. It's the Excelsior. Yeah. And Harbor Freight made a version of it. Jet had a version of it. Rikon, I think, had a version of it. It's the 1018.
Yep.
It's a 5-speed belt drive lathe. You know, you got to change the belt to change your speed. Bare bones. That's it.
And so how big of on your lathe? How big is something? So I guess you're doing the bowls on your buddy's lathe.
Nope, all the ones that you've seen have been done on mine.
Really? So how big of a circumference? I guess is
technically you could do 10 inches.
Okay,
but 10 inches you'd be, it better be perfectly round when you put it on.
Oh, gotcha.
Because you got a 10-inch swing, so you've got 5 inches from the center of your headstock to the bedways.
Gotcha. Okay.
But then you also got to look at horsepower of the lathe, of the motor, and all that. I think the biggest that I've done on that lathe was about 9 inches.
Okay, that's still pretty big bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
incredible.
Cool. I made a lathe. I did a candlestick and a bowl in high school in shop class, and I always enjoyed that. I had one time where the bowl, because the way that we did them in shop class is that you took a piece of wood and you glued a piece of paper in between the wood and the wood you're going to lathe, and that way you could break it off easy.
Yep.
And I remember one time, I don't know if I didn't put enough glue on or something, and I'm hitting that bowl and pop, flies off. Nope, that did it for me, man. That was whoo.
I've had some wood come flying past the head.
Yeah.
I've got the full face shield and all that, but it's still I've had pens explode and that chunk of wood comes and hits you in the face shield and it jars your back.
That's a quencher. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you were talking about my bowls, Tom. If you were to go back on my Instagram, I just pulled it up. From September of 2021, I've got a bowl that I think you would love.
All right. I will go check it out. I'm on a social media fast other than checking messages every week when I post the thing. But
what is that?
Yeah, that's pretty, man.
So I played around with an airbrush and acrylic paint. So that's my Clemson bowl. Oh. It's orange on top and faded to purple on the bottom.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I see it. Nice.
And then I did a South Carolina bowl too. So I did a red to black.
That thing's got to be ugly.
Yeah.
You got to do a Steelers one, black and gold.
I've done a Steelers pen.
Oh, have you?
Acrylic.
I have a pen. It's it's partially wood, and then it's like a 50 caliber.
Yeah.
Looking thing. It's like a just a little piece of wood in the middle, and then it's like a little bolt action thing on the
Yep.
sides. And I think my wife's dad's uncle or something made a bunch of them. I don't know, but man, that's awesome. You got anything in the shop right now you're working on?
I've got my laser going right now. I did a bunch of
What laser do you have?
Which one?
Okay, he's got lasers too.
A buddy of mine gave me an Atom Stack A5.
Yep.
Last year, little diode laser, and so I've been running that one. I did a bunch of coasters. I bought the Harbor Freight, or not the Harbor Freight, the Hobby Lobby coasters.
Yep.
And did a bunch of coasters for my daughter's teachers and teacher friends for my wife and the doctor that I work with. I gave them all personalized coasters for Christmas, and started that when I made some for Thanksgiving for our place setting. My parents and my brother came down here for Thanksgiving, and so I burned our name on it and then put everybody's name at the bottom. So that was their place setting, and they got to take the coaster home with them.
Oh, that's cool.
But my wife has an old painter's palette out that she wasn't going to use and going to throw away. I said, let me have that. And so I'm going to put that on laser and make a sign to put on the door for the art studio.
Oh, there you go.
So I've got it designed. I just have to have the time to go out and sit and let the laser run for an hour.
Yeah, I've got the X-Tool D1 Pro, and I haven't been out there using it in a while, but it is handy. I was thinking about one of the things I'm thinking about doing, and this could roll into shop talk, I guess, on my end. I've been out of the shop because it's cold. It's been in the single digits, and then it got up into the 20s. And let's see, it was, what's today? Monday. Saturday, it was 20 degrees, 30 yesterday, 50 today. It's going to be like 15 tomorrow. Pennsylvania, man, it's a whole thing.
So I shouldn't tell you that I was out this afternoon walking with the family in shorts and a t-shirt at 70 degrees.
Yeah, it's not going to be not like that here. No. It's cold, man. But years ago, I bought some leather working stuff and made a wallet and just some other stuff, and I didn't have the patience for it at the time, and I feeling an itch to get back into doing some leather stuff because it's something I can do inside. It's something I can do. My wife and I could be watching an episode. I could be on the coffee table, and so I'm looking to do some leather stuff, but mainly because I collect Bibles. I've got several Bibles I wouldn't mind rebinding. I'm like, it'd be cool to learn how to do some leather rebinding. And so I've been looking at getting some stuff for that and get into that. But then I remember, I'm like, I've got a laser. I can cut leather. And so I can buy templates for like wallets and just cut it out on the laser and then do the finish, like put it together and sew it together and do all that. So I may give that a whirl, but I got
insulated shop. Leather stinks.
Oh, dude, no kidding. I've done it before. It is the worst. It's like burnt hair. That smell. That's just like, oh, it's awful. Yeah, leather is no fun to laser at all. But yeah. So haven't done any woodworking. I've got several projects, but if I can see my breath in the shop, it's not worth me being out there. So I haven't been out there. But how about you, Tom? You got any projects working? I know you've been working a lot outside of the shop.
Yeah, my sternum is healing up, and I'm thinking I'm gonna probably brave again. I've been trying to be very disciplined and not overdo it, so I could heal up properly and not re-injure myself. But it's really starting to feel noticeably different. Like 2 weeks ago when I sneezed, I thought I was going to die. I thought somebody stuck a knife in my chest. It hurt so bad. And like the last couple of days, I've sneezed a couple of times, and it hurts. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I don't feel it, but it immediately kind of goes back to just being discomfort versus what I call pain. You know what I mean? And so I'm thinking probably in next week or so, I'm going to be back in the shop, and I've got plenty of projects to work on. It's just I haven't wanted to risk making it worse by getting out there and being stubborn and, overdoing it, picking up something heavy. But I've been on my tractor. I had put so many hours on it because I could do it, moving dirt. And a buddy of mine has 100-horse tractor, and he came over, and for 2 days we moved dirt. And so it's that's been a blessing that we got that stuff done. But yeah, I'm hadn't been touched any wood though. But hopefully next week I'm gonna
Actually,
be able to say I have. But that's all I was gonna say.
yeah. I have a tractor story. So my brother-in-law reached out to me last week. He said, hey, his fiance still lives in Tennessee and she's moving up here because he bought a place up here. He's like, do you still have that nice little 12-foot trailer? I'm like, yeah, I still have it, but I pulled it out of the barn to build my duck coop. And so it's got 4 foot of snow on it. He says, well, I'm going down to Tennessee this weekend. If you could get it out, if you could clean it off and stuff, and I'll come get it. I'm like, yeah, well, back where the barn's at, I can't get the truck back there. We've got, 8 inches of snow on the ground, and I'm not going to try to get my truck stuck. Well, I don't have the 3-point attachment for my tractor with a hitch on it. My father-in-law does. And so I called him and said, hey, can I borrow that to get this trailer out for my brother, for Aaron? And he said, yeah, so I went and got it. If that's not the coolest, the best thing is be able to back up to a trailer, lift up that 3-point, and just drive away with the trailer. I'm about to get me one of them.
Yeah, it was pretty slick.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. But yeah, well, Justin, where can people find you out on the interwebs?
So Instagram, upwoodworks is the best place to find me. I have a YouTube channel. I've posted 2-3 videos many years ago. You want a good laugh? Watch my first one. It was for a gift exchange or maker swap from the Southern Woodworkers. I filmed it and had a guy down in Florida or in Texas edit it. We did it like a silent film.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but wait, before we get off here, so tell me about the Upstate Makers Guild.
Upstate Makers Guild is a club that I've helped start with my buddy Daryl Jones, Dreadnought Woodshop, and Yellow Dog Woodworks here local.
Yeah, Dreadnought, he's also a wood turner, isn't he?
He is. That's who taught me how to turn.
Okay, yeah. That dude makes some nice stuff. And didn't he just build a new shop?
He did. That's where we actually have the meetings.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So he moved up here from Florida probably 3 years ago now. And he's built this shop and that's going to be his job. That is his job. He's going to do some content creation. He travels for and does demonstrations for Robert Sorby and Micro Jig.
Yep.
And he's going to teach some classes out of his shop. And so the classroom side is where we have our meetings. We don't limit it to wood turning. We don't limit it to woodworking. I mean, we call it the Makers Guild. Digital fabrication is part of it. So CNC, laser. I actually did a demo on laser a couple months ago. A lot of our demos have been turning related just because that's what we're set up to do right now with what he's got in the shop ready to go. We had one of the members does a lot of scroll saw work. So she did a scroll saw demo one meeting. But we have just a time of fellowship and goofing off and talking and all that. And we do a show and tell. So, bring a project, talk about it. And then we're going to work towards some challenge nights where everybody gets together and we have a challenge. So, maybe turning a pen or whatever, not as a competition, but to challenge yourself to do something.
Yeah.
And then we're going to try to do some community service stuff as we get going. Right now, like I said, we've just started in, I think June of last year was our first meeting. And I think we're up to maybe 10, 15 members.
That's awesome,
monthly.
Though. If I lived there, I'd join. I wish we had something like that here. I would love to have some other makers just to hang out with. And, but yeah, that's cool. Now I have to ask you one more question. So since you moved from West Virginia, been in South Carolina so long, now are you a Tiger fan or a Gamecock fan?
I'm a Mountaineer and a Thundering Herd fan.
All right, I can live with that. Thunder and Herd, man. But oh man, it's a stiff competition in South Carolina,
It is.
man, buddy.
It
But my family bleeds orange. We're
is.
100%.
Being an outsider, I can root for both because it's good for the state when they both do well. My wife is a South Carolina fan. Her family is always South Carolina. She went to the College of Charleston. They didn't have football. My daughter, I think, is leaning towards Clemson.
Smart girl.
Only because at this point in her life, she wants to be a vet.
Oh yeah.
And Clemson is working towards opening the first vet school in South Carolina.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, they're very well known for their engineering program, and which is why my dad went there. But I've got lots of friends that are Gamecock fans, but we all give each other a hard time, man.
Oh yeah.
It's fun. So very cool, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on, man. And when I think I'll probably be back in South Carolina sometime this year. So before I do, I will look you up. I want to come hang out, give me a turn-in lesson, teach me how to make a pen or bowl or something. So
we can definitely do that. Come on.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Justin, for coming on the podcast and sharing your heart and your guys' heart for kids and foster care and what the Lord's brought you through, and appreciate you, man. And everybody go check out Justin over at upwoodworks on Instagram. And yeah, man, appreciate you.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. Well, until next week, I'm Will from Flywood Works.
I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.